Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Music Business Etiquette. I'd like to discuss positivity and how important it is to maintain perspective in the group that you're working in or even in your own gigs if you're just doing solo stuff. And so I'd like to do this by sharing a few stories from the road. There's always some interesting things that can happen when you're out touring. Regardless of the best laid plans that you might have, things can always find a way to hit the fan. So, let's get started. Every musician alive has their horror stories. And it doesn't matter how much you practiced or checked your rig or rechecked your rig or changed your strings or changed your drum heads or backed up your keyboard rig on a thumb drive or in this day and age your guitar rig on a thumb drive, things are still going to crap out. And the reason for that is Murphy is a pain in the ass. That's why. And if anything can go wrong, it will. But it's important to stay positive in those situations, regardless of what happens. It's very, very difficult. It's definitely easier said than done. But it's important. And so you guys can laugh at my expense for this episode, because I'll share a couple of stories that are kind of amusing. And they're frustrating in the moment, of course, but you know, they're amusing nonetheless, because stuff happens and it doesn't matter what you do, unfortunately. One such time was when we were headed out to Saipan. I think this was last year. We were going out there on tour, and about half the band's luggage didn't make one of the connecting flights. And wouldn't you know it, that luggage was all the heavy stuff, i.e. the gear. And so everybody had clean underwear for the most part, but nobody had any instruments to play. And so we had to check in with the airline multiple times the next day. The first gig was the next day after the flight. And we had to check in with them multiple times to make sure that our gear had gotten there. And luckily, we got there about 3 hours before the gig, and we were able to go grab it and come back, set up sound check, and play the gig. But definitely made us sweat a little bit and caused, you know, a little bit of stress. Another interesting situation that I experienced was my first tour as a tour manager. I think that was 2010 or so. And so I was playing and running the tour as well. And we were about 5 hours into our drive, away from, our point of departure. And so then the truck broke down. So the truck with all of our gear and everything, it decided to just crap itself. And so when we arrived at our first stop, we had to contact a rental agency and get a truck and have it, drive it out to the yard where they towed our truck and, back them up, against each other and cross load all the gear and finish the tour. And we had to send the other truck back. I'll tell you what, that sucked. That was the first tour out. It was my first time trying to, handle situations like that. And, talk about, flying by the seat of your pants, but it ended up working and we finished the tour and everything was fine. But that's definitely a lesson in got to try to stay positive, got to try to stay focused, make it happen. We got to complete the tour. We got to do what we came to do. The other one that I can think of is down in Panama. We were playing a show and the area that we were playing in didn't have power, or at least not the necessary power for what we needed. So we were on a generator and the generator ran out of gas. I guess from what I remember, it was supposed to carry us through the show and it didn't. And so, as you can imagine, it's kind of funny. Same thing happens when, you blow the power at a gig and you're mid rocking out and then nothing all of a sudden. Kind of frustrating and kind of amusing at the same time, because there's absolutely nothing you can do. At least with a broken string, the band keeps playing and you rip your guitar off, and if you have a tech, they swap it out for you, or if you don't have a tech, you run and grab your backup, or or you change strings real quick and then you get back in the game. Unfortunately, with power, there's nothing you can do. You just kind of go, okay, well, alrighty, cool. And that actually reminds me of a time when I was at the NAMM show and watching one of the outdoor concerts on one of the big stages they have set up next to the Hilton. And the band that was playing, I think it was a conglomerate band, so it was a bunch of different artists. They were all jamming together, and it was getting towards the end of the night, and they were on the last song, and they came up to one of those big hit burnout endings, and come up, they stop for a second, and then right at that stop, the mains went out. just it was almost like somebody just decided to wait until they stopped and then unplug the mains. It was absolutely hilarious. And the front of house engineer that I was standing next to just had the greatest reaction ever. He's watching, of course, he's making sure, everything's going well. And then he just laughed. He just laughed when it happened because he knew it was the end of the show and there's nothing you could do. So all of a sudden, you go from mains, full blast to stage volume, nothing. And he just laughed. He's like, well, okay, there you go. And that's about all you can do, unfortunately. And you just have to stay positive, despite the issues. And the other thing to keep in mind with a number of these situations, either that I mentioned or your own situations, is to not worry about stuff that's outside your control. When power goes, that's outside your control. You can't really do anything about that. Sure, you can check the power, you verify with the tech people for the venue and make sure that it's good to go. And naturally, everybody wants the show to go off well, and so they check it, and they know it's good, and stuff happens. Breakers blow. It happens. Fuses blow. It just, it's part of it. So it's important to not worry about stuff outside your control. And the other thing that is also really important, regardless of what happens and regardless of what situation that you're in, whether it's rehearsal or you're on the road or you're just on a one-off gig, is to encourage each other. This is something I was actually talking about with a friend earlier today, and part of what spawned this episode. It's really important to encourage each other. Iron sharpens iron, and the more positive we are with our outlook on things, especially outwardly towards each other, when we're talking after a gig, before a gig, during a gig even, if you lean over and you whisper something to somebody, it's really important to be positive. It helps build each other up. It's very, very important. And the more that we build each other up, generally the better attitude we have, the happier we are, and the better we end up performing. And the better product, more often than not, an audience is going to get, because they're going to feel that energy. They're going to feel that positivity that is bleeding from the stage. They will feel that, and that's very important to try to project, not only to the audience but also to each other. Thanks so much for watching this episode. I know it was a little bit different, but I think it's important for us to remind each other that we need to be positive, despite any kind of adversity that we might be facing or issues that we might be facing. So if you do dig the episode, please be sure to like and share. And if you haven't subscribed to the blog, you can do so at musicbizet.com. And if you watch till the end of the video, there is the web address on a screenshot. So thanks so much, and I'll see you guys next week. Take care.